You don't have an emotion problem. You have a control problem. Right now, your mood decides your actions, your reactions decide your outcomes, and your feelings are quietly running your entire life. Anger makes you say things you regret. Fear makes you hesitate when you should act. Overthinking drains your energy before you even begin. And the worst part, you think this is normal. It's not. It's conditioning. You were never taught how to control your emotions, only how to react to them. So you live in cycles, triggered, overwhelmed, regretful, repeat. But here's the truth most people will never accept. Your emotions are not the enemy. Your lack of discipline over them is. Because the moment you stop reacting and start responding with control, you become dangerous, in the best way possible. Calm under pressure, clear in chaos, unshaken when others collapse. In this audiobook, you're not going to learn positive thinking. You're going to learn emotional command, how to detach from negativity, how to control your inner state, no matter what's happening outside, how to stop being ruled and start ruling. Because once you master your emotions, you don't just feel better, you become unstoppable. Chapter 1. Awareness before control. Control is never the beginning. It is the result. The desire to control emotions sounds powerful. It sounds disciplined. It sounds like strength. But without awareness, it is nothing more than blind effort. People try to control what they cannot even see. That is why they fail, again and again. The problem is not intensity. The problem is invisibility. Most emotional reactions happen before conscious thought arrives. Anger rises instantly. Fear locks the body. Overthinking floods the mind, and then the action follows. Words are spoken. Decisions are made. Regret appears later. This is not personality. This is programming. Autopilot is running your life. Look closely. There is a pattern in everything you feel. Nothing is random. Nothing is spontaneous. Every emotional spike has a trigger. Every trigger follows a sequence. And every sequence repeats until it is interrupted. But interruption requires awareness. Without awareness, the cycle continues. Triggered, overwhelmed, reactive, regretful. Triggered, overwhelmed, reactive, regretful. Again, again, again. This loop feels normal because it has been repeated thousands of times. But repetition does not make it right. It makes it familiar. And familiarity creates comfort, even when that comfort is destroying your control. Awareness breaks comfort. Awareness forces you to see what you have been avoiding. Notice the moment before anger takes over. There is always a signal, a tightening in the chest, heat rising in the body, a sudden shift in focus. It is fast, but it is there. Notice the moment before anxiety expands. The mind starts projecting. What if this fails? What if this goes wrong? The body responds before anything has even happened. Notice the moment before overthinking begins. One thought turns into 5. 5 turns into 20. The mind spirals without direction. These are not accidents. These are patterns. And patterns can be studied. Most people do not study their emotions. They suffer them. They justify them. They defend them. They say this is just who I am. That sentence keeps them stuck, because if this is just who I am, then nothing changes. But if this is a pattern, then it can be broken. Awareness shifts identity. Not this is who I am, this is what I am doing. That one shift creates distance. Distance creates control. Start here. Simple, direct, repeatable. Notice the feeling. Name the trigger. Pause before reaction. Again, notice the feeling. Name the trigger. Pause before reaction. This is not theory. This is training. The first step is noticing, not judging, not fixing, just noticing. Anger appears. Do not justify it. Do not act on it. Notice it. Fear appears. Do not escape it. Do not suppress it. Notice it. Overthinking begins. Do not follow it. Do not fight it. Notice it. This is harder than it sounds, because the mind wants to move. It wants to react. It wants to explain. It wants to act immediately. Awareness slows everything down, and the mind resists slowing down. That resistance is the proof that you are doing it right. Most people are uncomfortable with awareness because it exposes a lack of control. It reveals how automatic their behavior really is. It shows how often emotions lead and logic follows. But this exposure is necessary because control cannot exist without clarity. Clarity comes from observation. Observation requires stillness. Stillness creates awareness, and awareness begins to weaken the automatic response. Think about your last moment of regret, the words you wish you did not say, the action you wish you did not take. That moment did not come out of nowhere. It had a build-up, a sequence, a clear path. You just did not see it. Now you will. Now you train yourself to see earlier. Not after the reaction, not during the reaction, before the reaction. That is where power exists, between trigger and action. There is a small space, almost invisible. Most people never notice it. That is why they feel controlled by their emotions. They believe there is no gap, no choice, no control. But the gap is real, and awareness expands it. At first, the gap is tiny, a fraction of a second, easy to miss, but with practice, it grows. 1 second, 2 seconds, enough time to think, enough time to choose. Choice is control. Without awareness, there is no choice, only reaction. This is why emotional discipline always begins with observation, not action, not suppression, not forced calmness. Observation. Watch yourself like an outsider. See how quickly irritation rises when someone disrespects you. See how fear appears when you step into uncertainty. See how your mind searches for problems when nothing is wrong. Do not interfere yet. Just watch. This builds separation. Separation weakens emotional dominance. Because when you can see the emotion, you are no longer completely inside it. You are observing it. And the observer is always more powerful than the reaction. Repeat this identity. I observe before I react. I observe before I react. I observe before I react. This becomes your foundation. Not control, not discipline. Awareness, because awareness makes everything else possible. Without it, discipline collapses under pressure. Without it, control disappears in emotional moments. Without it, you return to autopilot, but with it, something changes. You begin to anticipate your reactions. You begin to recognize your triggers before they fully activate. You begin to feel the build-up before the explosion. And that is where everything shifts, because once you can see it coming, you are no longer a victim of it. You are preparing for it. Preparation creates advantage, and advantage creates control. This is the first real step toward emotional mastery, not eliminating emotions, not becoming cold, not pretending to be unaffected, seeing clearly. Again, notice the feeling, name the trigger, pause before reaction, repeat it until it becomes automatic. Because the goal is not to remove emotion, the goal is to remove blindness. Once blindness is gone, control becomes possible. And once control becomes possible, discipline becomes real. This is where most people stop. They notice once or twice and then forget. They return to reacting. They return to excuses. They return to saying, "This is just how I am." Do not stop here. This is only the beginning. Because awareness without interruption is still incomplete. Seeing the pattern is powerful. Breaking the pattern is transformation, and that is where the next step begins. Chapter 2. Break the reaction loop. Seeing the pattern is powerful. Breaking the pattern is transformation. Awareness showed you something uncomfortable. The reaction was never random. It followed a path. A trigger appeared. An emotion rose. An action followed. Then came the consequence. Then the regret. That pattern is still running. And now comes the harder truth. Seeing it is not enough, because the loop does not break on its own. Reaction feels natural. Reaction feels honest. Reaction feels justified. That is why it is dangerous. Reaction is weakness disguised as truth. It tells you to speak immediately. It tells you to act instantly. It tells you to trust the feeling without question. And most people obey. They call it being real. They call it being authentic. They say this is just how I feel. But real does not mean useful. Authentic does not mean effective. And feelings are not instructions. Reaction is a habit, a trained response repeated so many times that it feels automatic. Trigger, emotion, action, again. Trigger, emotion, action, again. Every time you react without thinking, you strengthen the loop. You make it faster. You make it stronger. You make it harder to break. Over time, it becomes identity. I am an angry person. I am an anxious person. I overthink everything. No, that is not identity. That is repetition, and repetition can be broken, but not by force, not by pretending the emotion is not there, not by trying to eliminate the feeling. The loop breaks with interruption, not reaction, interruption. This is where control begins to take shape. Between trigger and action, there is a space, small, almost invisible, but real. Inside that space is your only advantage. Most people never use it. They skip over it. They rush through it. They react before they even notice it exists. That is why they feel powerless, because they are skipping the only moment where power lives, the space. You must learn to enter it. Pause. That is the first command. Pause when the emotion rises, not after, not later, in the moment. Pause when anger spikes. Pause when fear appears. Pause when the mind starts racing. Pause. This single act disrupts the loop. It creates friction. It slows the automatic response. It gives you a chance to see clearly. Then breathe, not for relaxation, for control. A slow breath signals the body to calm down. It reduces intensity. It creates distance between you and the emotion. Breathe in, hold, release. Again, breathe in, hold, release. This is not weakness. This is control in action. Then delay. Do not speak immediately. Do not act instantly. Do not respond on impulse. Delay the reaction. Even a few seconds change everything, because emotions are temporary. They peak, and then they fall. But if you act at the peak, you lock in the consequence. Delay moves you past the peak. Delay gives logic time to return. Delay restores clarity. Pause, breathe, delay. Repeat it. Pause, breathe, delay. This becomes your new pattern. At first, it will feel unnatural. The mind will resist. It will push you to react. It will tell you this is urgent. This must be handled now. Ignore that voice. Urgency is often emotion, not reality. The more you practice interruption, the more you weaken the loop. At first, you will catch yourself late, after the reaction has already started. That is fine. Then you will catch yourself during the reaction, mid-sentence, mid-action. That is progress. Eventually, you will catch it before it begins. That is control. This is how identity shifts, not by thinking differently, by responding differently. Every interrupted reaction sends a signal. I am not controlled by this. Every delayed response reinforces a new belief. I choose my actions. Every moment of pause builds discipline. I am in control. Repeat it. I pause before I react. I breathe before I respond. I delay before I decide. Again. I pause before I react. I breathe before I respond. I delay before I decide. This is how the loop weakens, because the loop depends on speed. Fast trigger, fast emotion, fast action. Interruption slows everything down. And what slows down can be controlled. Consider anger. Without interruption, it explodes. Words come out sharp. Tone rises. Damage is done. With interruption, it changes. You feel it rise. You pause. You breathe. You delay. The intensity drops. The words change. The outcome improves. Same emotion, different response, different result. This is power, not removing emotion, directing it. The same applies to fear. Without interruption, fear stops action. It creates hesitation. It builds excuses. With interruption, fear becomes a signal. Pause, breathe, delay, then act anyway. Action breaks fear. The loop collapses. And overthinking. Without interruption, it spirals. One thought becomes many. Clarity disappears. With interruption, the pattern breaks. Pause, breathe, delay, then decide, then act. Movement ends the loop. This is the system. Simple, repeatable, effective. Pause, breathe, delay. Again, pause, breathe, delay. This must become automatic, because in high-pressure moments, you will not rise to intention. You will fall to training. Train interruption. Train control. Train response. Because every reaction you interrupt is a step toward mastery. Every moment you delay is a moment you reclaim. Every choice you make consciously is a break in the chain. The old identity weakens. The new identity forms, not reactive, controlled, not impulsive, deliberate, not emotional, disciplined. This is how the loop ends, not in one moment, in many, repeated, consistent, uncomfortable, but effective. And once the loop begins to break, something shifts inside you. You no longer feel pulled by emotions. You feel above them. Not detached in a cold way, detached in a controlled way. You still feel, but you choose. That is the difference. That is the goal. Because emotional mastery is not about feeling less. It is about reacting less. It is about choosing more. And that choice begins in the space you used to ignore, the space between stimulus and action. Master that space, and you master your responses. Master your responses, and you take control of your life. But interruption alone is not enough, because even when you pause, the mind is still speaking, and what it says next determines everything. Chapter 3. Detach from emotional noise. Interruption creates space, but what fills that space decides everything. The reaction has been slowed, the impulse has been delayed, the body is no longer in full control, but the mind is still active, loud, fast, unfiltered. Thoughts rush in to justify the feeling. Stories begin to form. Meaning gets assigned without permission. This is where most people lose again. Not in the reaction, in the interpretation. Because once the mind starts speaking, it feels like truth. It sounds convincing. It feels real. It demands attention, but most of it is noise. Not every thought is important. Not every feeling is valid. Not every internal voice deserves obedience. This is the next level of control. Detachment, not escape, not suppression, not pretending nothing is happening. Detachment is observation without attachment. The emotion is still there. The thought is still present, but you are no longer inside it. You are watching it. That shift changes everything, because what you observe, you can question. What you question, you can control. And what you control no longer controls you. Most people do the opposite. They feel something and immediately become it. Anger appears and they become angry. Fear appears and they become afraid. Doubt appears and they become uncertain. There is no separation, no distance, no control. This is identification. And identification is the root of emotional weakness, because once you become the emotion, you lose the ability to direct it, you follow it. Detachment breaks that link. It creates space between you and what you feel. The feeling is present, but it is not you. Repeat it. I feel it, but I am not it. Again. I feel it, but I am not it. This is not a phrase. This is a discipline, because in the moment it will not feel true. The emotion will feel personal. It will feel justified. It will feel like part of you. That is the illusion. Emotions pass. Identity remains. So do not confuse the two. Anger is temporary. Fear is temporary. Doubt is temporary. But the person who reacts to them can become a permanent one. That is why detachment matters, because it keeps your identity stable while your emotions fluctuate. Watch your thoughts like an outsider. Listen without agreeing. Observe without reacting. A thought appears. This is going to fail. Do not accept it. Do not fight it. Just see it. Another thought appears. They are disrespecting me. Do not obey it. Do not justify it. Just see it. This is how noise loses power. Not by force, by lack of attention. Attention feeds thoughts. Attention strengthens emotions. What you focus on grows, so stop feeding everything. Most thoughts do not deserve your focus. They are automatic, repetitive, conditioned, old patterns replaying themselves. And if you treat every thought as important, you will always feel overwhelmed, because the mind never stops producing. Never. So control is not about stopping thoughts. It is about filtering them, choosing which ones matter, ignoring the rest. This is detachment in practice. A feeling rises. You notice it. You do not chase it. You do not expand it. You let it exist without feeding it. It rises. It peaks. It fades. That is the natural cycle. But most people interrupt that cycle by adding meaning. They think about it. They analyze it. They replay it. They attach stories to it. And the feeling stays longer than it should. Detachment removes the story. It leaves only the sensation. And sensations pass quickly when they are not reinforced. Repeat this again. I see it, but I do not obey it. Again. I see it, but I do not obey it. This is control at a deeper level. Because now you are not just interrupting reactions. You are controlling interpretation. And interpretation shapes emotion. Two people face the same situation. One feels pressure. One feels opportunity. Same event. Different interpretation. Different emotional outcome. So if you control interpretation, you control emotion at its source. This is power. Not reacting less, feeling differently, because you are no longer accepting every thought as truth. You are choosing what to believe, choosing what to follow, choosing what to ignore. This is where mental strength begins to show, because detachment is uncomfortable. The mind wants engagement. It wants drama. It wants to pull you into every thought, every story, every possibility, and detachment refuses. It stays calm. It stays distant. It stays in control. That calmness feels unnatural at first, because you are used to reacting, used to engaging, used to following every thought to its end. Now you stop. Now you watch. Now you choose. This is discipline, not inaction, inattention. Where your attention goes, your emotions follow. So place your attention carefully, direct it intentionally, withdraw it when needed, because attention is power, and most people give it away without realizing it. They give it to negative thoughts. They give it to imagined problems. They give it to emotions that do not serve them. And then they wonder why they feel stuck. Detachment takes that power back. It says no, not every thought gets my focus. Not every feeling gets my energy. Not every internal voice gets my obedience. This is how you clean the mind, not by force, by discipline of attention. And over time, something changes. The the noise becomes quieter. Not because the mind stopped producing, but because you stopped listening to everything. You became selective. You became intentional. You became in control. This is what emotional mastery looks like at a deeper level. Not silence. Control over what matters. Because once you detach from noise, you can finally hear what is important. Clear thoughts, rational decisions, focused action, and that clarity leads to the next step. Because once you control what you listen to internally, you must control how you speak to yourself. Chapter 4. Control your inner dialogue. Clarity begins when noise fades, but what remains in that silence shapes everything that follows. The reaction has been interrupted. The noise has been reduced. The mind is no longer pulling you in every direction, but there is still a voice, constant, repetitive, influential, the voice in your head. This voice never stops. It speaks in every moment. It comments on everything. It interprets reality before you even notice it. And most of the time, it is working against you. Not because it is evil, because it is untrained. An untrained mind uses weak language. It exaggerates problems. It assumes the worst. It turns small discomfort into major struggle. A minor mistake becomes failure. A delay becomes disaster. A challenge becomes impossible. This is how emotional instability is created, not by the situation, by the description of the situation. Words shape perception. Perception shapes emotion. Emotion shapes action. So if the words are weak, the emotion will be weak. If the words are chaotic, the emotion will be chaotic. Control the words, and you begin to control everything else. This is the next level of discipline, not just observing thoughts, directing them, because once you detach from noise, you are left with choice. What will you say to yourself? Most people never ask this. They let the mind speak automatically. They accept whatever comes. They believe every sentence. That is why they feel unstable, because the voice is unstable. Listen closely to your internal language. When something goes wrong, what do you say? This is terrible. This always happens. Nothing works out. These are not facts. These are exaggerations. And an exaggeration amplifies emotion. It takes a small problem and makes it feel overwhelming. Now replace it. This is uncomfortable. This is temporary. This can be handled. Same situation, different language, different emotional response. This is control, not changing reality, changing interpretation through language. Repeat this principle. Strong words create stable states. Weak words create unstable states. Again, strong words create stable states. Weak words create unstable states. This is not motivational thinking. This is mental conditioning, because the brain responds to language as if it is real. Say something is terrible, and the body reacts with stress. Say something is manageable, and the body stays calm. The situation did not change, the words did. So your inner dialogue is not neutral. It is either strengthening you or weakening you. There is no middle ground. This is why discipline must extend to how you speak internally. Every sentence matters. Every description matters. Every label matters. Stop using language that weakens you. Stop saying always. Stop saying never. Stop saying impossible. These words trap you. They remove control. They create emotional extremes. Replace them with precision. This happened once. This is difficult, not impossible. This is a challenge, not a crisis. Precision reduces emotional intensity, and reduced intensity increases control. This is how strong minds operate, not by avoiding problems, by describing them accurately, because accuracy creates stability, and stability creates power. Train this daily, not occasionally, not when it is easy, daily. Catch the exaggeration, correct it immediately. Again, catch the exaggeration, correct it immediately. This becomes automatic over time. At first, it feels forced. The old voice will resist. It will say, "This is fake. This is not how you really feel." Ignore that, because you are not trying to express feelings. You are trying to control them, and control requires structure. Structure requires discipline. Discipline requires repetition. So repeat the new language until it becomes natural, until it completely replaces the old voice. This is how identity shifts, from reactive to controlled, from emotional to stable, from chaotic to precise. And there is another level, tone. Not just what you say, how you say it. The internal voice can be aggressive, harsh, critical, or it can be calm, direct, controlled. Most people speak to themselves worse than they would speak to anyone else. They attack themselves for mistakes. They insult themselves for failure. They create pressure through negativity. And then they wonder why they feel anxious, because the voice is creating the emotion. Change the tone, firm but calm, direct but controlled. Not, "This is terrible. This is a problem that needs to be handled." Not, "I cannot do this. This requires effort, and I will handle it." Not, "Everything is falling apart. This is a moment of pressure, and I remain steady." This tone changes the body. It slows the heart. It stabilizes breathing. It reduces emotional spikes. Calm language creates calm physiology, and calm physiology supports control. This is how the system connects. Thoughts influence words. Words influence emotions. Emotions influence actions. So by controlling the words, you influence everything that follows. This is leverage. Small change, massive impact. Repeat it again. My words shape my state. Again. My words shape my state. And once this becomes clear, you stop speaking carelessly to yourself. You become intentional. You choose your language like you choose your actions, carefully, deliberately, with purpose, because you understand the consequence. Every word is a direction, every sentence is a command, and your mind is always listening. So give it better commands, give it clear instructions, give it stable language. This is how emotional control becomes consistent, not just in intense moments, in everyday thinking. Because the daily internal dialogue builds the default state, and the default state determines how you respond under pressure. Train the voice daily, and pressure will not break you, because the voice remains steady, calm, controlled, strong. This is how emotional discipline becomes identity, not something you try to do, something you naturally are. And once the internal voice is under control, something powerful happens. Your actions begin to follow. Because clear thinking leads to clear action, and clear action is the foundation of discipline, which leads to the next step. Because thinking alone is not enough. Control must show up in behavior. Chapter 5. Build emotional discipline. Control begins with awareness, but it is proven through action. The pause was created, the space was found, the noise was seen for what it is. Now comes the part most people avoid, the part where comfort is denied, the part where standards replace feelings. Because awareness without action changes nothing. Observation without discipline creates illusion. The mind may be quieter now, but the real test begins when emotion rises again and demands control. Emotion will still speak. It will still push. It will still try to take the lead. That does not stop. What must change is the response, not the feeling, the response. Discipline is not about removing emotion. Discipline is about refusing to be led by it. That is the line. That is the difference. Weakness reacts. Discipline executes. Feelings fluctuate. They always have. Motivation rises and falls. Energy shifts. Confidence expands and contracts. This is normal. This is human. But standards do not fluctuate. Standards do not care how the body feels. Standards do not wait for the right mood. Standards demand execution. That is why most people fail. They wait for alignment. They wait to feel ready. They wait for motivation to return. And while they wait, nothing moves. Discipline does not wait. Discipline moves first. Discipline acts before emotion agrees. That is the shift. That is the identity. Action is no longer based on how it feels. Action is based on what is required. The task is clear. The standard is set. The execution happens. A tired mind will say, "Slow down." A distracted mind will say later. An emotional mind will say, "Not today." Discipline answers with one response. Do it anyway. Do it tired. Do it distracted. Do it without desire, because the outcome does not care about mood. The result does not care about feelings. Only action produces change. This is where power is built, not in perfect conditions, not in high-energy moments. Power is built in resistance. Power is built when emotion pulls one way and action moves another. That tension is the training ground. That is where identity is forged. Repeat the standard. I do not negotiate with emotions. I execute with discipline. Repeat it again. I do not negotiate with emotions. I execute with discipline. This is not motivation. This is programming. The mind must hear it until it becomes default, until hesitation fades, until action becomes automatic. Every time emotion is obeyed, the habit strengthens. Every time discipline leads, a new identity forms. This is not about one decision. This is about patterns, daily patterns, small moments, silent decisions. No one sees them, but they define everything. A person who only acts when they feel good becomes unreliable. A person who acts regardless of feeling becomes unstoppable. That is the goal, not intensity, not bursts of effort. Consistency, controlled, steady, repeated execution. The mind will resist this. It will try to justify comfort. It will create stories. It will exaggerate difficulty. It will search for escape. This is expected. This is predictable. The mind is trained for comfort, not growth. Discipline retrains it. The command is simple. Notice the emotion, acknowledge it, then move anyway. No debate, no delay, no overthinking. Action cuts through noise. Action silences resistance. Action builds control. There is no need to feel ready. Readiness is a myth. Readiness is a feeling, and feelings are unreliable. The standard replaces readiness. The standard says this gets done, no matter what. That is the contract. That is the rule. A person who masters this becomes dangerous in the best way. Unshaken, focused, consistent. Not because life is easy. Not because emotions disappear, but because emotions are no longer in charge. Repeat it again. I do not negotiate with emotions. I execute with discipline. This must show up in everything. In work, in habits, in decisions, in reactions. When frustration rises, stay steady. When boredom appears, stay focused. When doubt enters, continue forward. Each moment is a test. Each moment is an opportunity to reinforce control. There is no shortcut here, no trick, no secret method, only repetition, only practice, only consistent execution. That is what builds discipline. Not once, not sometimes, every day. Most people want control without effort. They want clarity without discomfort. They want results without discipline. That is why they stay stuck. Because control is earned, stability is trained, strength is built through resistance. The truth is simple. Discipline creates freedom. Emotional discipline creates inner stability. When emotions no longer control action, life becomes predictable, not externally, internally. Reactions stabilize, decisions improve, focus sharpens. This is how progress compounds. Small disciplined actions, repeated daily, create massive change over time. Not dramatic, not loud, quiet, controlled, consistent. A single decision does not define identity. Repeated decisions do. That is why this matters. Every time discipline wins, the identity strengthens. Every time emotion wins, the old pattern returns. There must be clarity. There must be a line that is not crossed. The line is this: feel everything, obey nothing. Feel the resistance, feel the doubt, feel the discomfort, but do not obey it. Action is separate. Action follows standards. That separation is everything. That separation is control. The mind will try again tomorrow. It will test the boundary. It will push for comfort. That is its nature. The response must remain the same. No negotiation, no exception, no compromise. Repeat the identity again. I do not negotiate with emotions. I execute with discipline. This is not about becoming emotionless. This is about becoming stable. Emotions can exist without control. Thoughts can appear without action. That is the difference. That is mastery. Once this is built, everything changes. Work improves. Focus increases. Confidence becomes real. Not because of success, because of consistency, because of trust in self, because action no longer depends on feeling. This is the foundation. Emotional discipline is the structure that holds everything together. Without it, progress collapses. With it, progress becomes inevitable. And once discipline is built, a deeper challenge appears. Not just controlling emotion, but controlling exposure, because what enters the mind shapes what must be controlled. The next level is not just reaction, it is protection. That is where control evolves next. Chapter 6. Master anger and impulse. Control is not only built in what is done, but also in what is allowed to enter and take hold. The mind was trained to act with discipline. Standards replaced feelings. Action became stable. But there is a moment where all of that is tested at once. A sudden surge, a sharp reaction, a force that demands immediate release. This is where most control breaks. Not slowly, instantly. Not through weakness over time, but through one uncontrolled moment that undoes everything built before it. Anger moves fast, faster than thought, faster than logic. It does not ask for permission. It takes control. It floods the body. It tightens the chest. It raises the voice. It pushes action without reflection. That is why it is dangerous, not because it exists, but because it accelerates everything. It compresses time. It removes the pause. And without the pause, discipline has no space to act. Impulse follows the same pattern: immediate, urgent, demanding. It creates the illusion that action must happen now. That delay is weakness. That reaction is strength. This is false. Immediate reaction is loss of control. Delay is power. The first rule is simple: slow everything down. When anger rises, time must expand, not contract, not disappear. Expand, create space where there was none. That space is control. That space is the difference between reaction and response. The body will resist this. The body wants release. It wants to speak. It wants to act. It wants to move. That is the moment where discipline must take over. Not after, not later, immediately. Lower the voice. Even if the mind is loud, the voice must remain calm. This is control. Relax the body. Release the tension in the jaw. Drop the shoulders. Slow the breathing. These are not small actions. These are commands. Commands that interrupt the emotional surge. Anger cannot survive in a calm body for long. It feeds on tension. It feeds on speed. Remove those, and it weakens. Repeat the rule. Slow down, delay, control. Most damage is done in seconds. Words spoken that cannot be taken back. Actions taken that cannot be undone. Decisions made without thought. All of it happens in moments, short moments, moments that could have been controlled. That is the cost of impulse. Permanent consequences from temporary emotion. Time is the weapon against this. Time breaks intensity. Time restores clarity. Even a few seconds create distance. Even a short pause weakens the surge. There is no need to solve anything in the moment of anger. Nothing important requires an immediate emotional response. That belief is the trap. That belief creates damage. The correct response is delay. Step back. Say less. Do less. Let the moment pass through without action. Silence is power here. Controlled silence, not avoidance, not suppression. Controlled silence that allows emotion to settle before action begins. The mind will argue against this. It will say respond now. It will say defend now. It will say act now. Ignore it. That voice is not logic. That voice is impulse. Repeat the command. Not now. Not like this. Not in this state. This becomes a habit. Just like reaction was a habit. Just like discipline became a habit. Control over anger is built the same way. Repetition, consistency, awareness followed by action. There is no benefit to uncontrolled anger. It does not make a person stronger. It does not create respect. It destroys clarity. It weakens decisions. It damages relationships. It breaks progress. Controlled anger is different. Controlled anger is quiet, focused, directed. It does not explode. It moves with intention. It waits. It chooses the right moment. It speaks when needed, not when triggered. That is power. Not loud, not aggressive, controlled. Impulse must be trained the same way. Every urge to act immediately must be questioned, not with hesitation, but with control. Pause, breathe, delay. The delay does not remove strength. It builds it. It shows command over self. It shows that action is chosen, not forced. A person who cannot control impulse is predictable, easy to provoke, easy to manipulate, easy to defeat. A person who controls impulse becomes unreadable, stable, unshaken. That is the goal. Stability under pressure, control under intensity. The body will send signals. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow. These are warnings, early signals, not commands. Warnings, recognize them, act on them, slow the breath, deep and controlled, one breath, then another. Each breath creates space. Each breath reduces intensity. This is not theory. This is practice. This must be applied in real moments, small moments first, minor irritations, small frustrations. Practice control there. Build the habit when the stakes are low. Then when the real test comes, the response is automatic. Not perfect, but controlled. Repeat the identity. I do not react in anger. I respond with control. Again, I do not react in anger. I respond with control. This must become instinct, not forced, not artificial, natural through repetition. Anger will still come. Impulse will still rise. That does not change. What changes is the response. What changes is the outcome. Control is not proven when everything is calm. Control is proven in chaos, in pressure, in moments where reaction feels justified. That is where discipline shows its strength. Every controlled moment builds trust. Trust in self, trust in action, trust in discipline. That trust becomes confidence, real confidence, not based on emotion, but on repeated proof. There is no need to eliminate anger. That is not the goal. The goal is mastery, to feel it without being controlled by it, to experience it without acting blindly. That is emotional strength. And once this is mastered, a deeper level of control becomes necessary, because not all emotional pressure comes from sudden anger. Some of it is constant, subtle, persistent. It drains energy slowly. It builds over time. It does not explode. It lingers. That is a different kind of challenge, one that requires a different kind of discipline. That is where control moves next. Chapter 7. Destroy Overthinking. A quiet mind is not always a clear mind. Silence can hide a different kind of noise. Not loud, not explosive, slow, repetitive, persistent. The kind that drains energy without action. The kind that feels productive but produces nothing. After mastering visible reactions and controlling intense emotions, a subtler enemy appears. It does not rush. It stalls. It keeps the body still while the mind runs in circles. Overthinking is not intelligence. It is fear disguised as logic. It pretends to protect. It pretends to prepare. But it delays. It creates imaginary scenarios. It builds problems that do not exist. And the more it runs, the more real those problems feel. The trap is convincing. It sounds reasonable. Think more. Analyze more. Wait for clarity. Wait for certainty. This is the lie. Clarity does not come from thinking alone. Clarity comes from movement, from action, from engagement with reality. A mind stuck in overthinking is disconnected from action. It lives in possibility, not reality. It creates outcomes without testing them. It predicts failure without evidence. It hesitates without cause. That hesitation becomes habit. That habit becomes identity. The solution is not more thinking. The solution is interruption. Immediate and decisive. Action breaks the loop. Action cuts through the noise. Action replaces imagination with evidence. The rule is simple. Decide fast. Act immediately. Adjust later. Repeat it. Decide fast. Act immediately. Adjust later. This is not recklessness. This is controlled execution. The decision does not need to be perfect. It needs to be made. The action does not need to be flawless. It needs to begin. Overthinking waits for perfect conditions. Action creates progress, despite imperfect conditions. Every moment spent thinking without acting strengthens the loop. Every moment spent acting weakens it. The mind will resist this shift. It will demand more time. It will search for more information. It will create doubt. This is expected. That is the pattern trying to survive. Break it anyway. Make the decision. Move forward. Let the result teach what thinking cannot. Mistakes will happen. That is part of the process. Mistakes are data. They provide clarity. They refine direction. Overthinking avoids mistakes, but it also avoids growth. A person who acts learns faster. A person who hesitates stays stuck. There is no perfect plan. There is no perfect timing. There is only action or delay. Delay kills momentum. Delay increases doubt. Delay strengthens fear. Momentum builds confidence, not the other way around. Confidence does not come before action. It comes after repeated action, after proof, after evidence. That is why action must come first. The mind will say wait. The standard says move. Repeat the identity. I do not overthink. I execute. Again. I do not overthink. I execute. This must become automatic. Thought appears. Decision follows. Action begins. No extended debate. No endless analysis. Controlled thinking, followed by immediate movement. Set a limit. Think briefly. Decide quickly. Then act. This creates a new pattern, a new rhythm, a new identity. Overthinking thrives in stillness. It grows in inactivity. It feeds on delay. Movement starves it. Even small action is enough to break the loop. A single step, a single decision, a single move forward. It does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be consistent. Each time action replaces overthinking, control increases. Each time hesitation wins, the loop strengthens. This is a daily practice, not a one-time fix. Notice when the mind starts to loop. Notice when thoughts repeat without progress. That is the signal. Act. Do something real, something physical, something measurable. Send the message. Start the task, make the call, begin the work. Action reconnects the mind to reality. It replaces imagined outcomes with real feedback. That feedback creates clarity, not before, after. Repeat the rule again. Decide fast, act immediately, adjust later. This removes pressure. The decision does not need to carry the weight of perfection. It only needs to start movement. Adjustment is part of the process. Direction improves through action. The person who waits for perfect clarity never moves. The person who moves gains clarity along the way. That is the difference. Overthinking creates the illusion of control. Action creates real control, because control comes from influence over reality, not thoughts about reality. The mind will always generate possibilities. That does not mean they matter. Most do not. Most are noise. The discipline is choosing action over noise. This is how momentum is built. One decision, one action, repeated daily. Momentum reduces resistance. Momentum increases speed. Momentum builds confidence. Soon the gap between thought and action narrows. The delay disappears. The response becomes immediate. That is when overthinking loses its power, because it no longer has time to grow. A decisive mind is a quiet mind, not because thoughts disappear, but because they do not linger. They pass. Action follows. This creates clarity. This creates direction. This creates progress. The goal is not to eliminate thinking. The goal is to control it, to use it when needed, and ignore it when it becomes noise. That is mastery. And once overthinking is removed, a new level of awareness becomes possible. Because when the mind is no longer trapped in loops, it begins to see patterns more clearly. It begins to recognize triggers before they take control. That awareness leads to the next step. Chapter 8. Reframe negative states. The same event can break one person and build another. Nothing outside changes. The pressure is identical. The moment is the same. What changes is the meaning assigned to it. After learning to act without hesitation and recognizing the patterns that trigger emotion, a deeper layer reveals itself. The reaction is no longer the problem. The interpretation is. The story behind the feeling is what shapes the outcome. Every emotion carries information. Not always comfortable, not always clear, but always pointing somewhere. Pain signals pressure. Fear signals expansion. Frustration signals resistance. These are not random. These are indicators. Signals that something is happening that demands attention, not avoidance. Most people misread these signals. Pain becomes proof of failure. Fear becomes a stop sign. Frustration becomes an excuse to quit. The emotion is not the enemy. The meaning attached to it is the problem. Change the meaning, and the emotion changes with it. This is control at a higher level. Not just stopping reaction, not just delaying impulse, transforming the internal interpretation itself, turning what feels negative into something useful, something strengthening. The situation remains the same. The mind changes its position. A difficult moment appears. The default response says, "This is bad. This is unfair. This should not be happening." That interpretation creates resistance. Resistance creates suffering. The cycle continues. Replace the interpretation. This is training. This is pressure that builds capacity. This is necessary. The emotional intensity begins to shift, not because the situation improved, but because the meaning changed. Repeat the mindset. This is not against me. This is building me. Again. This is not against me. This is building me. This is not denial. This is not pretending something is easy. This is about choosing a meaning that creates strength rather than weakness. Pain becomes a signal to grow. Fear becomes a signal to move forward. Discomfort becomes a signal that progress is happening. This is how resilience is built, not by avoiding difficulty, but by redefining it. The mind is always labeling experiences, good or bad, easy or hard, success or failure. These labels shape emotional response. Most of these labels are automatic, unquestioned. That is where control must be applied. Pause the label. Replace it intentionally. A challenge appears. Instead of calling it a problem, call it a test. Instead of calling it stress, call it pressure that builds strength. Instead of calling it failure, call it feedback. These are not just words. These are instructions to the mind. Instructions that shape emotion. Weak language creates weak states. Strong language creates stable states. The internal voice must lead this shift. The same way discipline was trained, the same way impulse was controlled. Repetition builds belief. Repeat the new frame. This is not against me. This is building me. Over time, this becomes automatic. The mind begins to default to strength instead of resistance. It begins to look for growth instead of escape. This does not remove difficulty. It changes the experience of it. Two people can face the same obstacle. One feels defeated, the other feels challenged. One retreats, the other engages. The difference is not the obstacle. The difference is the interpretation. That is power. Emotions follow meaning, always. Fear feels heavy when it is seen as danger. Fear feels energizing when it is seen as opportunity. Pain feels unbearable when it is seen as punishment. Pain feels purposeful when it is seen as growth. Frustration feels draining when it is seen as failure. Frustration feels motivating when it is seen as feedback. The situation does not change, the meaning does. That is the shift. This requires awareness. The moment an emotion appears, the question is not what is happening. The question is, what meaning is being assigned to this? Then adjust it, not passively, intentionally. This is mental control in action. The mind will resist at first. It will return to old labels. It will try to pull back into familiar patterns. That is expected. That is part of the process. Correct it again. Repeat the frame again. This is not against me. This is building me. Each repetition weakens the old pattern. Each repetition strengthens the new one. This must be applied consistently. In small moments, in large challenges, in daily frustrations, in unexpected setbacks. Every moment becomes training. That is the identity shift. Life is no longer something that happens. Life becomes something that trains. Nothing is wasted. Every experience becomes useful. Every difficulty becomes material for growth. This removes victim thinking. This removes helplessness. This builds control, because control is not about eliminating problems. Control is about using them. That is the difference between reacting to life and mastering it. There is no need to wait for better conditions. The current conditions are enough. The current pressure is enough. The current challenge is enough. Everything can be used. Repeat the mindset again. This is not against me. This is building me. This creates strength that is not dependent on circumstances. Strength that does not collapse under pressure. Strength that grows because of pressure. This is how emotional stability becomes unshakable, not by avoiding negative states, but by transforming them. Once this is mastered, emotional control becomes consistent, not occasional, not situational, consistent across environments and challenges. And when consistency is built, a final level of control becomes possible, because emotions no longer disrupt action, they no longer distort thinking, they no longer control behavior. What remains is clarity, steady, controlled clarity. That clarity leads to the final step. Chapter 9. Create emotional resilience. Calm is not the absence of pressure. Calm is control within it. The ability to stay steady has been trained. Reactions have been slowed. Meaning has been reshaped. But pressure does not disappear. It increases. It returns in stronger forms. It tests everything that has been built so far, because control that only works in comfort is not control. Real control must survive intensity. Life does not adjust to make things easier. It applies weight. It adds resistance. It introduces uncertainty. This is constant. This is unavoidable. The only variable is strength. Emotional resilience is not given. It is built. It is earned through exposure. Avoidance weakens the mind. Every time discomfort is avoided, tolerance shrinks. Every time pressure is escaped, capacity decreases. The mind becomes fragile, sensitive, easily overwhelmed. The opposite builds strength. Facing discomfort expands capacity. Staying present under pressure increases tolerance. Enduring difficulty without collapse creates stability. This is the path, not comfort, not ease, exposure. Small challenges first, then larger ones, gradually increasing intensity. The mind adapts. The nervous system adjusts. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once caused reaction becomes controlled. This is training. Just like physical strength, resistance must be applied, consistently, progressively. The rule is simple. Do not run. Do not avoid. Stay. When pressure appears, stay present. Feel it fully. Do not escape mentally. Do not distract. Do not numb. Stay with the experience. This is where resilience is built. Not in theory, not in preparation, in the moment itself. The mind will search for exits. It will try to reduce discomfort. It will suggest distraction. This is instinct. This is survival behavior. But growth requires a different response. Stay, breathe through it, observe it, let it exist without resistance. The intensity will rise, then it will fall. This is natural. Emotions move in waves. They peak, they pass. But only if they are not resisted or avoided. Most people never learn this. They escape before the wave passes. They never see that it ends, so they fear it. They believe it is permanent. It is not. Every time the wave is endured, confidence builds. Not surface confidence, deep confidence. The kind that comes from proof. The kind that says this has been handled before. Repeat the belief. I can handle this. I do not break under pressure. I adapt and continue. Again. I can handle this. I do not break under pressure. I adapt and continue. This must be repeated in real moments. When stress rises, when tension builds, when everything feels heavy. The words are not magic. The repetition trains the mind to stay steady instead of collapsing. Resilience is not about feeling nothing. It is about continuing despite feeling everything. That is the distinction. Pressure will always exist. Deadlines, conflict, uncertainty, loss. These are part of life. Trying to eliminate them is wasted effort. Building the capacity to handle them is the solution. This changes everything. Because once pressure is no longer feared, action becomes easier. Decisions become clearer. Focus becomes sharper. Fear loses its grip when it is faced repeatedly. The first exposure feels intense. The second feels familiar. The third feels manageable. Over time, what once felt impossible becomes normal. This is adaptation. The body and mind are designed for this. They adjust based on experience, but only if exposure happens. Avoidance stops adaptation. Exposure creates it. There must be intentional practice. Seek controlled discomfort. Situations that challenge but do not overwhelm completely. Build tolerance, step by step. Cold environments, difficult conversations, demanding tasks, situations that require presence under pressure. Each one is an opportunity. Each one is training. The goal is not to suffer. The goal is to strengthen. Stay present, stay aware, stay controlled. Notice the signals: increased heart rate, tightness, urgency. These are normal. These are part of the process. They are not threats. They are sensations. Observe them without panic. Let them exist without interpretation. This reduces their power. Emotion becomes manageable when it is not labeled as danger. That is another layer of control. Repeat the belief again. I can handle this. I do not break under pressure. I adapt and continue. This becomes identity, not someone who avoids, not someone who collapses, someone who endures, someone who adapts. That identity shapes behavior. Behavior reinforces identity. This loop builds resilience. There will be moments where control slips, moments where pressure feels too high. That is part of the process. That is not failure. That is feedback. Reset, regain control, continue. Resilience is not perfection. It is persistence. The ability to recover quickly, the ability to continue despite difficulty. Each recovery strengthens the system. Each continuation builds momentum. Over time, stability becomes the default. Pressure no longer disrupts. It becomes part of the environment. This is the goal, not to remove pressure, but to operate effectively within it. A resilient mind is calm in chaos, focused under stress, clear under uncertainty. This is not natural at first. It is trained through repetition, through exposure, through consistency. There is no shortcut, only practice. Stay with the process, stay with the discomfort, stay with the pressure. This is where strength is built, and once resilience is established, emotional control becomes complete, because nothing external can easily disrupt internal stability. Reactions are controlled, meaning is chosen, pressure is endured. What remains is consistent execution, regardless of conditions. That is mastery. And that leads to the final step. Chapter 10. Become emotionally unshakable. Mastery is not a moment. It is a pattern. Pressure has been faced, discomfort has been endured, reactions have been slowed, meaning has been reshaped. The mind has been trained to act with discipline instead of impulse. But the final shift is not about doing something new. It is about becoming something permanent, a state that does not collapse when tested, a standard that does not change when conditions change. Most people experience control occasionally, in certain moments, in certain environments. When things are calm, when stress is low, that is not mastery. That is temporary alignment. Mastery is consistency under pressure. It is stability when everything tries to disrupt it. Emotional control must become predictable, not unpredictable, not dependent on mood, not dependent on circumstances. Predictable. A predictable mind is a powerful mind. It does not swing wildly. It does not react differently every time. It responds with stability, with clarity, with control. That is the goal, to become predictable to oneself. No guessing, no uncertainty, no internal chaos. Calm becomes the default. Not forced calm, not artificial calm, real calm, built through repetition, built through exposure, built through discipline. This is the result of everything trained so far. The pause is automatic. The reaction is controlled. The meaning is chosen. The pressure is endured. The action is consistent. This creates a new identity, an identity that does not depend on how it feels, an identity that operates on standards. Repeat the identity. I control my emotions. My emotions do not control me. Again, I control my emotions. My emotions do not control me. This must be reinforced daily, not once, not occasionally, daily. Identity is built through repetition. The mind believes what it hears repeatedly. The body follows what the mind believes. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Small, controlled responses, repeated daily, create permanent stability. There is no need for extreme effort. There is a need for consistent effort. Every moment becomes an opportunity to reinforce control. A small irritation, stay calm. A moment of stress, stay steady. A surge of emotion, stay in control. These are the moments that define identity, not the extreme situations, the daily ones, because what is done daily becomes automatic. Automatic behavior becomes identity. Identity becomes reality. This is how emotional mastery becomes permanent. There is no switch. There is no final moment where everything is complete. There is only consistency. The work continues. The practice continues. The reinforcement continues. That is what keeps control strong. Without repetition, old patterns return. Without awareness, habits weaken. Without discipline, stability fades. This is why the standard must remain. No negotiation, no exception. Emotion will still rise. Situations will still challenge. Pressure will still exist. None of that changes. What changes is the response. Always controlled, always measured, always intentional. This is what makes a person unshakable, because nothing affects them, but because nothing controls them. There is a difference. Feeling does not equal losing control. Emotion does not equal reaction. Thought does not equal action. This separation is mastery. The ability to experience everything without being ruled by anything. That is strength. That is stability. That is control. Repeat the identity again. I control my emotions. My emotions do not control me. This must be the baseline, not a goal, not a future state, the present identity. Live from it. Act from it. Reinforce it. Over time, this becomes natural. Calm is no longer something that must be created. It is something that exists. Stability is no longer something that must be forced. It is something that remains. Control is no longer something that must be remembered. It is something that operates automatically. That is the final stage. A mind that does not break under pressure. A system that does not collapse under stress. An identity that does not shift with emotion. This is emotional mastery. This is what separates those who are controlled by life from those who control themselves within life. Because control over self is the only real control that exists. Everything external will change. Everything internal must remain stable. That is the standard. That is the discipline. That is the identity. And once this identity is built, the work does not end. It evolves, because maintaining mastery requires awareness. It requires attention. It requires continued discipline. This is not a finish line. This is a way of operating, a way of thinking, a way of responding, a way of living. And this is where everything comes together, not as separate lessons, but as one system, one controlled mind, one stable identity, one unshakable standard. This is the result. This is the transformation. This is the control that was built from the beginning. And now it is yours to maintain. You started this audiobook believing that your emotions were something that happened to you, something external, something uncontrollable. Now you know the truth. Your emotions are patterns. Your reactions are habits. Your internal state is trained behavior. Nothing about your emotional life is random. You have been conditioned to react, conditioned to feel first and think later, conditioned to let temporary states control permanent decisions. And that conditioning has been costing you everything. Lost opportunities, broken focus, regret after reaction, energy drained into overthinking, confidence destroyed by fear. But now you have something most people will never have: awareness. You can see the pattern. You can see the trigger, the emotion, the reaction, the consequence. And once you can see it, you can break it. Control is no longer theoretical. It is practical. Pause before reacting. Detach from the noise. Control your internal dialogue. Act based on standards, not feelings. Again and again. This is not something you do once. This is something you train daily, because emotional mastery is not a switch. It is a system you build through repetition. Every time you choose not to react, you get stronger. Every time you stay calm under pressure, you gain control. Every time you act despite fear, you take power back. And over time, something shifts. You stop being emotional. You start being precise. You stop being reactive. You start being intentional. You stop being controlled. You become the one in control. This is what separates weak individuals from powerful ones. Not intelligence, not talent, not luck. Control. The ability to remain steady when everything around you is unstable. The ability to think clearly when others are overwhelmed. The ability to act correctly when emotions are screaming at you to do the opposite. This is power, and now the responsibility is yours. Because knowledge without action is useless. If you go back to reacting, nothing changes. If you return to old patterns, this means nothing. So here is your challenge. Starting today, you do not allow a single emotion to control your behavior without awareness. Not one. When anger rises, you pause. When fear appears, you act anyway. When overthinking begins, you move immediately. You train control in real time. Not tomorrow, not later, now. Because every moment is a test, and every test is an opportunity to prove something to yourself. That you are not your emotions, that you are above them, that you are in control. Do this long enough, and your identity changes. You are no longer someone trying to control emotions. You become someone who already does. And once that identity is locked in, everything changes. Your decisions improve. Your confidence increases. Your presence becomes stronger. Your life becomes stable. This is what emotional mastery gives you, not comfort, control. So the next time your emotions try to take over, remember this: you don't have an emotion problem, you have a control standard. And from this point forward, your standard is higher. Now prove it.